This is a lecture from OpenTuition.
This is a series of 4 lectures dealing with the recommended approach to the Strategic Business Leadership exam for ACCA September-December 2020. Before you look at the lectures, you are strongly recommended to download the question paper and to read it before the lectures on each of the questions. So when you download the SBL exam, or in a real case doing it, you know the kind of format now. There is usually a kind of overview, a brief introduction, a list of exhibits, and then you come on to the requirements, typically 4 requirements, often broken down into A and B and so on. And then you have the list of exhibits, substantial amounts of information coming afterwards. And of course it can be very intimidating, but I wouldn't worry too much. Take your time. It will take you, I think, about half an hour anyway, to completely read the exhibits, absorb kind of what you're being told, relate them back to the requirements of the question. Don't rush into it. You cannot possibly answer a question unless you have properly understood the information which has been provided for you. And you need to read all the exhibits. There is no guarantee that Exhibit 1 deals with question A, if you like, that question 1 or Exhibit 2 deals with question 2, and so on. Information from Exhibit 4 could be of potential relevance in question 1, and you need to read all the information to become familiar with it. The way to go about it, I would now suggest, having looked at quite a number of these, is first of all to read the overview. Don't worry yet about the exhibits, but the overview helps to orientate you. And immediately you see here we have a not-for-profit charitable organisation. And it's interesting, the APM exam for the same sitting, September-December 20, had 2 questions dealing with not-for-profit organisations. And immediately you should be alerted that this is rather more complex in terms of stakeholders and in terms of performance indicators. The importance of non-financial performance indicators likely to be much higher than in a commercially orientated for-profit type of organisation. Read the overview, then read the requirements, and then read at your leisure almost the exhibits. Sometimes you'll to almost immediately identify that a certain exhibit has kind of nothing to do with question 1 and so on, but you need to read them to start with, make annotations in them, try to relate them back to the requirements of the question and so on. Take your time. This is not dead time, this is planning your answer, this is becoming familiar with the question. It reduces your chance of missing something which is vital to understanding the organisation. So half an hour to become familiar with it. Don't worry that you seem to be spending all of that time and in a way producing none of the answer. It's an essential foundation to producing a good answer. Anyway, looking at question 1 here, there are a couple of parts to it, A and B. Prepare a briefing note. So a briefing note, we have to do it in that sort of format. Essentially a briefing note is a bit like a memorandum, but it says briefing note at the top. Briefing note to, from, date, and what it's about. No need particularly for much of an introduction in a briefing note. You can get straight down to it here. So here for part A, you are asked to explain the specific nature of the principal-agent relationship in BCO as a charitable organisation, the advantages of having a two-tier board structure, and how its mission and strategic objectives are meet its key stakeholder needs. Hopefully, there'll be some clue in the question about what or who the stakeholders actually are. So the specific nature of the principal-agent relationship here, and when you read the question, you see actually in the overview there's a board of trustees which oversees the management of the charity, which is undertaken on a day-to-day basis by the management board. So it's a bit like the management board is like the board of directors, and I think the board of trustees are representatives essentially of the various stakeholders. So I think the principals in this will be the board, and the agents in this will be the management board. The principals will be the trustees, and the agents in this will be the management board. And what is the essential relationship between principals and agents in any situation? Well, the agents should be acting in the best interests of the principals. So it is the duty, indeed a fiduciary duty, in other words, to act with good faith, to focus your attention on the principal, to do what they need, to do what they want. That is a fiduciary relationship. You have to act in their interests, not your own interests. You have to put their wishes into effect, not your wishes into effect, and the like. So that fiduciary relationship is there. You have also, within this, there is the idea of looking after the assets or the undertaking of the organisation to safeguard those assets, not to squander money in some way. You have to be careful not to over-reward yourself. So that would not, as part of the management board, to give yourself large pay rises, to try and slip through large expense claims and so on, would not be correct. And it would be the board of trustees, the top of this here, who would then, in a way, be really responsible to the various stakeholders of the charity. I don't myself think you have to write a huge amount about this. Know that there's this distinction, principal-agent relationship, fiduciary duty is a good one. If you can come up with that, the idea that the agent should be acting in the best interests of the principals is very important, rather than acting for themselves. And also the idea of a custody of the assets, looking after, safeguarding the assets. The advantages of having a two-tier board structure. You may have to, there are certain advantages in having certain well-known advantages, shall we say, standard advantages in having a two-tier board structure. It doesn't want any disadvantages, like perhaps a slowing down of decision making. It's not interested in that. It just wants the advantages. And advantages can come in like there's a built-in overseeing function, that the management board makes decisions and then maybe it goes to the trustees who can review those decisions. It allows the trustees maybe to be more objective, and the trustees can then set objectives, set targets, if you like, for the management board, which they have to try and attain. If you have only one board, there is a danger that they set themselves objectives which are a little bit too easy. If you get a bit stuck on this, the other way of corporate governance, other than having a two-tier board, is over one-tier board with non-executive directors. And non-executive directors are there to give advice, to warn, to argue against, to make suggestions and so on. And all we've done, it's a bit like moving your non-executive directors up to the higher board, and they still have these valuable overseeing and corrective functions built in there. Because the trustees typically will be not rewarded, or certainly not rewarded on any other than a kind of per day basis, not rewarded on any basis of performance, it means that their decisions will not be influenced by perhaps taking undue risks. And they will maybe have a fairer way of looking at the rights and requirements of all the stakeholders in the charity. And there should be transparency as well, as suggested in the model answer here. Two-tier system encourages transparency within the charity between the two board levels and what they're doing and who they represent. So having this distance between the day-to-day management of the organization and people who are detached from that, not earning very much from it, who can be nothing to lose, if you like, no, very little skin in the game, as they would say nowadays, who would be willing maybe to create a bit of a fuss if things didn't go well, whereas the management board may be inclined perhaps to cover up errors. And then how BCO's mission and strategic objectives meet its strategic needs. And one of the exhibits which is available here is setting out the mission, the vision, the aim, and the strategic objectives here. And that's good. It tells us what the mission is. We have vision and aim. I always find this distinction between mission, vision, and aim. It's never something that to me seems useful. I'm quite happy with a mission, and then I'm very happy with very specific strategic objectives, but the two in the middle, the vision and the aims, seems to me just to confuse matters. Luckily here we go from the top, the mission, down to strategic objectives, meet its key stakeholder needs. And we have here got specified for us strategic objectives, and what we must do is to pay attention to those in answering this question. So they are 3 clear strategic objectives: ensure that 100 threatened species are protected, invest in 100 wildlife habitat projects through providing training and education for our local staff, ensure that 1 million people are better connected with nature through education and awareness of nature, of the natural world in which they live in. And part 3, which I think would be the longest of this initial section, we will have to be looking at those strategic objectives, as well as the mission a little bit, protecting and conserving wildlife. But that's, I think you can see, if you meet the objectives, you are pretty much meeting the mission. Its key stakeholder needs. And here we have perhaps a big gap almost in the information. Who are the stakeholders? And the stakeholders will be contributors to the charity, either public or commercial contributors to the charity. Governments might be involved in contributing money as well. There will be local people, So if you are buying up land and going to turn it into some sort of national park, to stop hunting, to say, no, you can't plant certain sorts of cash crops there because we are leaving this as a natural reserve, then you're affecting the local people who live there. There'll be local businesses. If this attracts tourism, then of course tourists will come to see wildlife parks and reserves and the like. So local businesses will be affected. And then of course I think that perhaps there should be the animals as well, which are going to be given a habitat and the chance of a better life. So we do have to think up sometimes who the key stakeholder needs are. So if we think strategic objective number 1, ensure that 100 threatened species are protected and returned to their natural habitat, obviously that is going to feed into the stakeholder group, which is basically animals there. Invest in 100 wildlife habitat projects. Well, key stakeholder needs, we would have to think, you can't plant a crop there to people. Are we going to in some way compensate them for that? Are we going to provide some sort of maybe alternative employment there? Because people will need employment, people need a way of earning money, and we could say that our steps that we take may impinge on that in some way. And ensure that, and then we have providing training and education for local staff. And then ensure that 1 million people are better connected with nature. And this is members of the general public. And I mean, do they have a need? Well, these are going to be donors, aren't they? You're only going to donate to this charity if you feel that it's a worthwhile charity to donate to. And if we can educate people that the natural world they live in is important, then this is going to be helping both donations, helping people to feel better about themselves, and it can be tied in very well with this strategic objective. And then analyze financial and non-financial performance here, and very important that you get that. Okay, we have the results in one of the exhibits here, and one of the problems you need to be aware of as accountancy students is that you go and grab with great relish the financial results, and we'll be comparing x1 to x0. We can see that admissions have gone up, which is good. It says analyze, so we'll be looking at pluses and minuses. It's a bit like evaluate, not a huge bit of difference maybe between those two verbs. Admissions have gone up. We can see that membership fees individuals has gone up. Corporate has increased spectacularly, which is really very good indeed. Education programs which have gone down, and you could say, well, that is going to impinge a little bit on one of the strategic objectives, which actually mentioned education, didn't it? Very nicely, the Wild Park shop and cafe have gone up, a very valuable increase in the amount of revenue. We want more of that. Donation grants and legacies have gone down. Bad news. And I think maybe buried in the information somewhere, you will see that maybe the world is coming out of a bit of a recession, and maybe companies and individuals have got less money to spend on a more discretionary type of way. Animal support costs, be good if we were given what inflation was in here. The support costs have gone up, well, maybe about 10%, which is quite a lot. Staff training has gone down, and again that might impinge on one of the strategic objectives, which was to give training to staff. Costs of operating wildlife park, shop and cafe have gone down, which is very good, especially as the income has gone up in that. Costs of other commercial income have gone up very substantially. Oh, not very substantially, gone up a bit in there. But that has been probably repaid okay, because corporate income has increased. Corporate income has increased by 120. This has increased by about 120 as well. So we're actually about break even on that. Maybe some of the money that's spent on increasing corporate income will still bring in more income the next year. Maybe there's more to come. But at the moment, it's maybe not clear that it's paid for itself. Down at the bottom of the page, you'll see things like number of staff gone down slightly, number of volunteers gone up, and you can argue this is really quite good. Volunteers will obviously be cheaper, although they might not have the skills required there. Visitors have gone down, and that is disappointing, because within the strategic objectives, we do have here ensure 1 million people are better connected with nature, and it implies that has gone down. Income per visitor, however, has nicely increased, probably related to the increase in the income from the park, shop and cafe. Number of educational training programs has gone down, again, disappointing news within that. But a great result here, the number of animals returned to natural habitats has gone up. And all this means is really going through these figures, both financial and non-financial, saying this is good, this is bad, saying this is good because it ties in with objectives, this is bad maybe because it misses some of the objectives. You would sometimes be linking good performance with extra costs and so on there. But it should be something which you can get a lot of marks on really fairly easily.